Okay, so let's get started.
All right.
We're really glad to have you all here tonight to explore housing options together. As you saw from our notice, we're welcoming Andy Richardt, who is the father of Capstone student Henry Richardt. So he's part of our community, and he is also part of the MinuteMan Arc community, where he is working to help folks there explore housing options and where they're kind of pioneering a new housing structure called micro units, which we'll hear about tonight. So Andy is here to connect us. Part of his work is to connect folks who are interested in housing options for their children from the belief, which we all share, that it's better when we do this together and we have a lot to teach each other and learn from each other. So you know the three of us, Pam Varrin, Lola Piscopo, Kathy Tyrer. We're really thrilled to add this family learning opportunity to our schedule this year. And it really came from parent questions and parent requests to learn more about housing. So um, without further ado, we're going to uh, turn things over to Andy. He has a presentation to share with us, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and sharing from all of you. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
being here, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks, Pam. And thank you, Kathy and Lola, for including me, for inviting me. As Pam explained too, I have a 20-year-old son, Henry, who we're very fortunate is in Lola's classroom. All the classrooms are great, of course, but Henry loves school. Um, so we're very fortunate there. We're just going to give it an overview of different housing options inside, as it says, inside and outside the box. Uh, I just to give a quick background. So several years ago, I started planning for housing for Henry and recognized that there were some challenges out there for all of us, but I was trying to learn as much as I could. And inevitably, I would go to a meeting and there would be a couple in the back that were elderly and they would meekly raise their hand and they didn't have a plan. And the plan then becomes, once they're no longer able to care for their loved one, the plan becomes next available bed, wherever that might be. And honestly, it just broke my heart that that was the solution for families, that you could spend decades taking excellent care of your loved one and then you have no control. So I started gathering families to talk about housing. We would invite guests. We were in the basement of a local church because they were willing to give us the space. And we would invite experts in each month to talk about housing, just because I wanted families to be talking about it, planning for it. Even though it's overwhelming, it's very daunting to think about, but to get them thinking about it. Then COVID hit and that stopped that momentum. Uh, but I was fortunate then 2 years ago I've been talking with Gene Goldsberry from MinuteMan Arc, and they had been getting the same feedback that families wanted to talk about housing. They wanted solutions for housing. So I was able to come on there in a part-time role. And I'm at MinuteMan Arc, but I'm not a MinuteMan Arc salesperson. I'm fortunate to have that platform to speak from, and allows me to interact with many families and learn from families as much as I share, and to look at different housing models across the country and see what's working and what can we bring to our community. So tonight, I welcome questions. As I said, I learn as much from you, more from you than you're going to learn from me probably, but the idea is to get the conversation going. We're going to talk about the inside the box, so where the traditional housing models, and then we'll talk about one that's outside the box. So Lola, if you could flip the page. So you can kind of think about housing on a line, on a spectrum, where community residences or group homes are at one end, and those are for individuals who require 24/7 care. Then as you move across the spectrum, it becomes more independent. The challenge is that there's a big gap in the middle. There's a huge leap from community residences to independent living. And there's not a lot in the middle. And that's where we're working. And there's the community residences are incredible. They're great, great people working there. They're the solution for a lot of families. But the challenge there is that they're also very, very costly for the state. So they're not encouraged to continue to add more community residences, um, which, even though they might be the best resource for individuals and families, and there are a lot of families that are not going to be prioritized to be in a community residence, for their loved one to be in a community residence until they're no longer able to care for their loved one. So we're working in the middle, if you think of a spectrum. So we could go ahead and flip that. So these are the areas that we're going to talk about. So community residences, you may be familiar with those. You may recognize them more as group homes. Sometimes I think community residence sounds a little less daunting and a little more friendly. But those are for individuals who need 24-hour support. They would go to a day program. They get out in the community too. It's not that they're always at home, but they are going to need a lot of supervision and assistance. It's typically going to be, the state doesn't like to see a group residence with more than 4 individuals. And that's really top down from the federal as well. There's a lot of effort put into deinstitutionalize and to spread out individuals, so it wasn't an institution. So they decided that 4 is the number. They don't like to do more than 4. That's okay. But there are also sometimes it would be better to have more than 4 and you have more peers to interact with. But 4 is the number that you're typically going to see in a group home. So there's a lot of support there. You're going to have a lot of staff coming in and out. There's going to be transitions, but they are going to handle everything from getting up in the morning to medication to everything that an individual needs. So that's community residences. If you could flip ahead, Lola. So shared living is an interesting model that came several years ago that was presented by DDS in the state as one of the primary solutions. When it works really well. And shared living, that would involve, so for me, I'll just talk from my perspective, that would involve Henry going to live with another individual or a family who would essentially fill my shoes and fill my wife Lauren's shoes, to welcome Henry into their family, make sure that he's living his best life. And if you find a good match, and Nonotuck is an agency that's west of us in Massachusetts, they do a really good job of that. In return, the shared living provider receives they're paid essentially to help care for that individual. The challenge with shared living is if it doesn't work out for Henry in our case. Well, Henry's living in someone else's home, so who leaves? It's Henry. And so Henry would be back with us, or they'd be scrambling to find a solution for Henry. But with shared living, you can flip the model and you can do reverse shared living. So with our home, Lauren and I could move out. It could be a reverse shared living provider. It could be a family that moved into our home. And Henry, then that's less disruption for Henry. He's still in his community, in his neighborhood where people know him. And if it doesn't work out, it's the shared living provider that moves out. It's not Henry that moves out. And one thing to be said too, for the shared living provider, there's oversight there as well. So it isn't that Henry moves in with another family and no one knows what happens. It's something that is going to be a DDS referral, just as the community residence is a DDS referral. There's going to be supervision to make sure that Henry is well taken care of. So I don't know, just take a quick break, Pam. Did I see a question? Do we want to tackle questions as we go? I'm happy to do it either way.
I think that's fine. Karma, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. My question is, can a shared living situation be the client in Section 8 housing and then a roommate that is, I don't know how you go about getting the roommate, if the family would be in charge of interviewing them and sort of dealing with all of that kind of legal stuff, or if an agency would. So can you have shared living in Section 8 apartments, that kind of thing?
Yes, you can have shared living because that's a separate program. So the shared living provider will be compensated by DDS, which is exclusive of the housing voucher. So those could work together. The challenge with shared living is as I said, when it works well, it works really well. And you can see relationships develop that continue for many years. The challenge is that there aren't a lot of people that want to be shared living providers. So it often will fall into the family to find that shared living provider. They'll work with their service coordinator, DDS, say that, yeah, we want Henry to do shared living. He's good with shared living. And DDS will say, okay, great, we're going to refer you to an agency. DDS is not necessarily going to find that shared living provider. They're going to refer him to an agency. The agency then will try and find that shared living provider, but oftentimes it's going to fall on the family to find that. It has a much better rate of success if you come in with a shared living provider as well. Then they're really going to grease the skids and it's going to work well. But a lot of it's going to fall on the family. And that shared living, when it doesn't, it can work really well for a while. And then, if he's living with a young family and they move, then you're back to square one to start again and find that shared living provider. And it will probably fall back on the family. So hopefully that answered the question. So shared living can work. I think the one thing is that there aren't a lot of agencies that are doing reverse shared living, but it's possible. It's possible. I still kind of hold out hope that we will find the right shared living provider for Henry someday to come into our house and help him stay in his community. So let's go into the next one. So independent living. This is, again, going to be a DDS referral. Most likely, you could private pay for any of these if you choose and have the resources, but most likely it's going to be a DDS referral. This is going to be an individual, and just speaking from experience with MinuteMan Arc, we have several individuals we're providing independent living support to. These are individuals who are living in an apartment, either alone or with a roommate, and we have staff then that is available to come in and help them with, as a list here, it could be grocery shopping, it could be meal prep, it could be getting to appointments, recreational opportunities, it can be bill paying, things that they need to continue living independently. And again, it's going to be a DDS referral. Our experience is that on average, individuals get 5 hours a week of independent living support. So it's not a lot. These are for individuals who have a lot of independence, but there are certain things that they need support to be out in the community. Now it can vary. We have an individual who has 13 hours. She's older and needs more support. So her hours have increased, but it's certainly not full-time care. And there is some flexibility there because you may say, well, gosh, by the time you go down to Children's for an appointment and come back, if you use most of your 5 hours for the week, depending on the agency, there's flexibility there as well, too. They're not going to get you down to Children's and then your 5 hours are up and you find your way home. So it's not that strict. but it is limited in the amount of support that they provide. So the last option, traditional model, is the adult foster care or family care. It goes by both names. So this is for individuals who need assistance with activities of daily living. And so some of you may be familiar with AFC already. If your loved one, it says here 16, Henry needed to be 18, but it's something that Henry needed that level of support. So my wife, Lauren, his mom, is his AFC provider. So I can speak from experience on how that works. So on a monthly basis, we reached out to MinuteMan Arc, that was before I worked there, and asked about AFC. He qualified for it once a month. There's an initial intake, and then once a month, a nurse and a social worker come to the house. Lauren gives them a report of what Henry has done over the past month, doctor's appointments, activities. They check in to make sure he's good. Depending on the level of need, it may not be that social worker nurse, they can alternate. Henry's level of need is such that they both come every month. And they're here for the first Thursday of the month for like 5 minutes. After that initial intake, it gets easier and the process gets smoother. But again, you have that oversight to make sure that Henry is well taken care of. It seems a little overkill when he's living with us, same as he's done for the past 20 years, but the nature of the program is to make sure that he's well taken care of. A couple of gotchas with adult foster care for those who aren't familiar with it. The guardian cannot be an AFC provider. So we had to make a decision. Guardianship is the best option for Henry with his decision making. We had to make a decision who's going to be the guardian. We chose me to be the guardian because I typically will go to doctor's appointments with him, and that makes that process easier. But I can't be his AFC provider, which is a little crazy that I'm not his care provider, yet I'm the one taking him to appointments and such. So it's a little silly, and it's really, really unfortunate for single-parent households that you have to choose. So there is legislation that the ARC of Massachusetts has been pushing, trying to rectify that. I don't know the reason why they did it that way. The legislature did it that way, but that is the way it is right now. So if you're a single parent and you need to be a guardian, you cannot be a care provider, technically, and receive AFC compensation. There's also a group adult foster care, and we will talk about that a little bit later, but they're both essentially the same, that if you need assistance with activities of daily living, then you can be compensated as a care provider, an AFC provider.
Andy, if you don't mind taking a question.
Happy to.
And I see Shazad, if you want to.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much. This is Shazad, Jay's dad. I'm sorry, my camera is off.
No worries.
Yeah, this is great. So my question is around this, the AFC care that you're referring. Is it something like particularly the provider, something similar to the PCA services, or this is totally a different when you are in a living arrangement? I'm asking this because Jay, he is 17, and we receive this assistance to hire the PCA who provides these services, and was wondering, are these two things are totally different or somewhat linked to each other?
That's a great question. Thank you. That was something that I should have addressed as well, is that when we made the decision about who was going to be the guardian, who would be the care provider, we also had to make a decision whether we were going to go the AFC route or continue with PCA services. You can only do one or the other. The difference with the AFC provider, that can be a parent that's living with the individual. PCA is broader in that it's someone outside the household, typically, or a family member or an outside caregiver. So it gives more flexibility. Like Lauren is the only one that can be the care provider. because she's living with him. So yeah, you have to make that decision whether you're going to do PCA or AFC.
Yes. Just to add to that, it also is related to the funding. Mass Health funds both programs, and so individuals can have both.
Okay, so yeah, this is great, and I'm grateful for this because there are a lot of things, I think we all in the learning process, and I have no shame in saying that this is the first time I'm hearing this AFC services available as well. So and so the question is, I mean, you don't have to answer it no, but the thing is, if somebody who is receiving the PCA services and if at some point they decide that okay, they might going to be a benefit from this service, is this something that can be changed at this stage, or who should the family or the individuals interested in this go to find out more about that?
That's a great question. So yeah, you can make the change. Henry was approved for PCA hours and we were utilizing those, but when he turned 18, we switched to AFC. And we did that by finding our own AFC agency, and they helped us through that process. You basically have to sign something that renounces your eligibility for PCA. I'm sure that can be reversed and you could switch back.
Yes.
But at the time, you have to say, I'm not going to do any more PCA while I have AFC.
I'll just add something to that if that's okay with you. Also, sometimes you have to kind of weigh the benefits, so you might want to look at the benefits and the risk of each program, and also the financial benefits, because you have been evaluated, or Jay has been evaluated, for how many hours of personal care attendant time he's eligible for. And you can compare that to the stipend. It's not a number of hours, it's a daily stipend. So you really kind of want to figure out, well, which one is going to get me a little more funding to do the things that I need to do for Jay, whether it be hire somebody or do them yourself. So that's kind of one of the ways that people decide which is best for them. Each family is different.
Great, thank you so much.
Stipend. So it's, even though it's an earned income, I mean, you're working hard for it. It's not taxed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Good questions.
Yeah.
So that's adult foster care. These are really the services that are available now, depending on the individual's need. That it's going to be it could be a combination of these, but primarily it's just one of these paths. And they're really, as we talked about, both ends of the spectrum. So now we can go, I think, outside the box and talk about micro units. So micro units is, again, something that we've been working on with families to how do we fill that gap in the middle for those families that are not prioritized for residential services from DDS, but are looking for, and their loved ones, most importantly, are looking for an opportunity for more independent living. So it's probably easiest to see what micro units look like, an example of that, and then we can dive into the details. So if you could go on to the next one, thank you. So this is, it might be a little hard to see, but when you think about micro units, it's a cluster of modified one-bedroom apartments. You're basically creating a small community of one-bedroom apartments that can range from 400 square feet to 700 square feet. This picture is similar to what we're doing, but not quite the same, and I'll explain why. But this is a micro unit development that an ARC in Connecticut is developing. And the four corners of this building are each going to be occupied. It's going to be the residence of an individual with intellectual or developmental disabilities. In the center at the top is an apartment for a live-in staff member. And this is not someone who comes in and does a shift and goes home. This is an individual where this is their This is their residence. This is where they live. Below that, so the center bottom is a staff area. That's where it differs in that for us, that wouldn't be a staff area. That is going to be a community space. And when I talk about the modified one bedrooms, so the modified one bedrooms, the modification is that for those individuals for whom a full kitchen is not appropriate from a safety standpoint, that's going to be the primary modification. So it may be that rather than having a full oven and stove, that they have a tavolo or a June oven, something that, and a fridge and a microwave. So something where they can still do meal prep, but for safety reasons, it's not a full cooktop. The individual that is living with them that we call a safe neighbor, that person would have a full kitchen. They have a full, it's their full residence. And depending on space and the needs of the individuals, that community space could include a full kitchen, which is from, you think about this as the potential for a transition, that this could be a living classroom for them preparing meals together. That, yeah, there's a stove there because if they're able to transition into their own one-bedroom apartment or a two-bedroom with a roommate, let's say, they're going to have a full kitchen. And so this is the training ground to get used to that. And one way to think about the micro-unit model is, so Henry's older sister, Emily, is in college. Well, when she went away to college, she was transitioning out of our family home, but she didn't have all the skills to live independently as an 18-year-old. She was able to go off to college and she had guardrails. She had a dining hall. She's not going to starve. She had an RA for safety. There was support there. So she could try it out. She could fail without crashing and burning. And she could learn to develop those independent living skills. That's something that for Henry and his peers, that's not there. So that's where this community space could be a living classroom to practice those skills in a safe environment. It's also would include a family room so that Henry loves to watch football, but the thought of him watching every game alone and in his unit, well, it makes me a little sad that he would love to be watching with his peers. So that's a spot for them to gather as well. In addition, the micro unit model, it's a full residence. You know, each micro unit is a full residence with a modified kitchen. But if Henry's in a community residence and he wants to have company, well, do they go in his bedroom and sit on his bed? You know, that's not his best life. This allows him to have that space. If he gets tired of being around everyone or he's an early bird going to bed, he can go back to his unit. He has his own space, but he can come out and interact with his peers as well. The idea, too, being that the peers are going to support each other. There might be something that he's good at and one of his peers is not, and vice versa, and they're going to support each other. In talking with families and their loved ones, you know, as much as we talk about inclusion in the community, they still want to be around their buddies. They don't want to be isolated in an institution, obviously, but they don't need, some of them don't need full immersion in the neighborhood. They'd rather be with their buddies and have the same amenities as other neighbors. You know, they can still walk to the library or store, that, you know, but that's what this allows, is that we're trying to give them their best life. And that's really been the goal behind micro units, to take a step back. So what we came up with the initial micro unit model. Then we presented it to families and they made some big changes, which is great. I knew I didn't have all the answers. I was pretty sure of that. But families, we got their input. And again, we know it's not going to be perfect the first time. And but I think we've conquered a lot of the big challenges. And that's why we're out sharing it now. That this is a model. If nothing that we're doing is proprietary to MinuteMan Arc. If someone takes this and makes it better, I'm going to be the first one sharing. That's awesome. If people are able to utilize this without any involvement from us, terrific, because there's a huge gap there that needs to be filled. So that's preaching, but that's the idea behind the micro units. Now, it all sounds hopefully very good, but the big piece, like this is the building. And the building, as challenging as it is to get our first building, that's the easier part. The services, that's the part that really makes it go. So I think the next slide starts to talk about those services. So there are really 4 primary roles to make this really go. So there is a day mentor. So if you picture a regular day. So again, we'll pick on Henry. So he needs some help getting going in the morning. So there's a day mentor, and mentor that came from the parents, the families. They like the word mentor because again, it's a learning environment too. They're learning to be independent. So a day mentor might come in and help him get going in the morning. Or for individuals who don't need that help getting going in the morning, then their hours are more toward the afternoon. But the assumption is that he's going to have a place to go during the day. He's going to have a day program. So might need some help getting out the door in the morning. Day mentor is going to help with that. He's going to go off to his program. He's going to come home. Day mentor is there to welcome all the individuals, check how their day went, get them settled, get them a snack. That's one person would be, and that day mentor is a staff that's coming in. It's staff that would be staff from the agency. So someone that's fully vetted and trained, and they're going to handle that period of time when they arrive in the afternoon to getting them settled in the evening. And depending on, so much of this is intentionally flexible because every individual and situations can be different. But it might be just the cue to make dinner and to make sure that they're having a good dinner. It may be helping them prepare dinner. It might be preparing dinner for them. It's all going to depend on what's that cohort of individuals living in the micro unit. But they're covering that period of time from after program till settled in the evening. The assumption is that then the individual can be on their own for a couple hours or with their peers. That it's not a cruise ship where we got activities going all the time. They need to have some quiet time, and they're gonna, what they do. And it's interesting because I'm in a group with families, and they have 3 of them have loved ones in a group home, and we meet from 7 to 8:30, and at 8 o'clock the phones go off because their loved one is calling at 8 o'clock each night that they just know. So that maybe it's talking to your kid from 8 to 8:15 and making sure they're settled, but the assumption is they can have some of that independent time. Now, the day mentor is left once everyone is settled. The night mentor, or I kind of like the name safe neighbor, that person is the one who's occupying that 5th unit. So they have responsibilities for the safety of the individuals overnight. Now, it doesn't mean that they are jack of all trades, but they are the responsible person. If there's a thump in the night, or someone's not feeling well, or the power goes out, to give the individuals that confidence that they can be out of the family home. And there's a triage. They're going to triage the situation. Okay, I know you're not feeling well. This is who I call. And it may fall back on the parents or siblings at that point. There has to be some family involvement here. It's not a drop-off activity. So that night mentor, that safe neighbor, we've tried to limit their qualifications such that they need to be a responsible person. They're going to be fully vetted as well. But do they need to be a nurse? Well, maybe in some situations, but first one out the door, no, we don't need to have someone that's a nurse, because we want to have as broad a pool of applicants to choose from. Now, why does the safe neighbor do that? Because they're going to receive either free or significantly reduced rent to live there. And they will have respite. families are going to have to help out. The agency's going to have to help out because no one's going to take a position where they have to be there 365 nights a year. So there's going to have to be some compromise there. But that is a person that gives the confidence for these individuals to be out of the family home. And maybe they're the one that's prodding them in the morning, depending on who that safe neighbor is, to get them going. I say that their compensation is the rent, because the other piece, we have to fit all the numbers together to make this work and make it financially sustainable for families.
Mm-hmm.
So the other roles are the independent living specialist. That can be private pay, but it's most likely to be that independent living support that I mentioned earlier with the inside the box. We were talking about the 5 hours a week. The way we envision that independent living specialist is that's a DDS referral, but I love the IEP and that model where we're developing goals and how do you get from here to there? So the independent living specialist is going to be helping to develop those skills. That's more the one-on-one. That day mentor is there to support everyone and make sure everyone's safe and in good shape. But the independent living specialist comes in and works on those one-on-one skills. Or the independent skills one-on-one, rather. And then the weekends, that's the challenge. That's always the big challenge is what are they going to be doing on the weekend? So that's going to be a combination of agency staff, but it's not, as I said, it's not a cruise ship where you got all these activities going on all the time. There's going to need to be family involvement. So great example was families on the Cape. There's 8 individuals living together in 5 adjacent townhomes. So there's 8 families involved. So every family has the 8th Sunday. You have one out of every 8 Sundays where you're responsible for involving all 8 individuals if they choose to be involved. But it might be a trip to the mall. It might be a barbecue. It might be a Super Bowl party. But when it's your Sunday, you have a plan. And that allows the families to stay involved because I think that's really important for a successful transition. And going forward, it also allows the families to get to know who their loved ones are living with and be part of this. I think sometimes when I watch our kids interact, that they have this own amazing community that we're just on the fringe of. And this allows you to be part of that every Sunday in that example. So weekends, as I said earlier, it's not a drop-off activity. The micro units, you're going to have to be involved. But I'm hoping that you're going to want to be involved. So we'll share this. I don't need to go through everything, but these were some of the what families told us that their loved ones would need and who might fill that role on a day-to-day basis. I think there's some that are continued on the next page too, but I know y'all can read it.
Andy, Mary has a question in the chat. Are there micro units in a mass now? Is that Cape situation you just spoke of an example of that?
Yeah, so they're doing it. They do have a safe neighbor that lives there. That is a private pay model where one family developed it and worked with other families that their loved one went to school with. So it's close to what we're doing, but it's not publicly funded like we're planning to do. And TIL is an agency that you may have heard of. They have a micro unit. I'm not sure the details of it. I think it's in Chelsea. So and then there's another one in development in Western Mass, but that's focused more on those with acquired brain injuries. Good question. So this, again, more support roles. What's the next slide, Lola? Okay, so let's go back because what I didn't include is a slide. How is this paid for? And partially that's intentional because we're still figuring out details. But the way that and we've borrowed heavily from other models, similar models. You may be familiar with Mainstay that has something similar, but there's our community residences. The specialized housing is a buy-in model, but we borrow generously from them as well. And then there's an agency in Fort Wayne, Indiana that we've borrowed from, in Michigan, Washington State. So, but how do we fund this? Initially, it's not intended to be a DDS residential program, except for that independent living support, that independent living specialist. So it's going to be a combination of different resources to fund it. We talked about how the overnight person, the safe neighbor, is going to be compensated with free or significantly discounted rent, meaning everyone else picks up the cost of their utilities and such. We talked about adult foster care initially. There's also something I mentioned called group adult foster care. Adult foster care is the care provider lives with the individual. Group adult foster care allows individuals who still need to be eligible for adult foster care, meaning they need significant assistance with activities of daily living, but they can pool their resources. So that individual does not need to live with them. So that is now how we fund that day mentor from 3 to 8, is for individuals combining their GAFC funds. And if an individual's not eligible for GAFC, then that would have to be private pay. But the idea is that mostly these individuals will qualify. They can pool their resources, and that covers that piece of the staffing. The independent living specialist we talked about, that's funded by DDS. The rent, that is the key there, and we could have a whole presentation on Section 8 and rental vouchers, but that's a piece that is necessary for most families to make this sustainable over the long term. Just a quick overview of the rental voucher. It's something that's provided by either the federal or Massachusetts government, and it allows then for an individual to pay 30% of their income toward rent, and the remainder of the rent is paid by the voucher. So it makes it a lot more affordable. Now, you can't use a voucher to say, I want to go live in a palace. There is a threshold for which we can only pay this much rent. So we have to figure out how to build this residence while keeping the rent under that threshold so individuals can use their rental voucher. But the idea is, and we've talked with planners, we've talked with families, our goal is to, how do we implement this such that the individual, they're contributing their SSI, but the out-of-pocket cost for the families is about $15,000 or less a year. So that sounds like a lot, but if that's all you're paying out of pocket, then I think that's going to be affordable for a fair number of families. Now, also, we're working on doing this and making it financially sustainable so that it's a model that DDS takes and runs with too. That it can be, when we talk about those, if we could move this from outside the box to inside the box, that's going to benefit a lot of families. But we can't be dependent on that initially. We have to get out there and demonstrate the concept. So that's where, Pam, you mentioned earlier, the idea of connecting families. Mm-hmm. Some of the most successful models I've seen across the country were developed by families. But how do you find those families? Cotting obviously does a great job of connecting families while we're here, but it becomes more difficult because it's such a regional school and we're spread. So how do we connect families? That's something that we're working on as well. And we're trying to create, I recognize that I need to help facilitate that. I've talked with other agencies and attorneys, and how do we bring families together so that you can start to create those cohorts, those groups of families that are going to work together and work well together on a micro unit. Now, that's not to put the burden on the family to build it, but this works really well if the families and the individuals get along. Mm-hmm. Who amongst us would like to just be thrust into a situation living with strangers?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think, here, next steps, make sure that people know what you want. But awareness, I'm not running into, I think we can all help spread the word. I don't run into a lot of resistance. I run into a lack of awareness. So we're talking with towns that MinuteMan serves. We talk with developers. No one says, I don't want to do this. They say, I didn't know there was a need. They don't think about our kids once they're no longer in the school system. They don't think about what happens next. And once you explain it, oh yeah, you're right. And I don't want Henry to have to move to Salem or Springfield or somewhere to find a residence. They get it that we'd like to be where our kids are comfortable. That's where they grew up. That's their hometown. I see another question. Sorry, I'm just babbling.
No, that's great. Great. Stacy, I see you have your hand up. Jump in anytime.
Okay. I am just not good at using Zoom on my phone. I apologize. I just wanted to mention I was on this I'm trying to find my notes now and my room's a mess. I did one of those Perkins transition meetings on housing, and there were two guest speakers that they had. And Andy, they were consultants for hire. You had to pay for their service. I think some of it was complimentary in the beginning, but it was kind of that same thing. I think they were both Massachusetts based, where they had a network of families that all wanted this particular thing. And it wasn't for the micro unit, but kind of the similar thing where they, it's kind of like almost like a match.com for families.
Was that in January?
Disabilities. What's that?
Was that in January? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Was it like
Partners for Housing
or something?
Yeah, it was Partners for Housing. Pam,
yeah,
I think, is the founder. So I could talk about that. But I don't want to interrupt you. I already did. But do you want me to talk more about that?
They were just going to like pool together their resources to share SSI and, SNAP benefits and all of that kind of stuff. Is that something that would be beneficial to pool in with the micro unit concept?
Yeah. So they started in Washington State, and it's free to Washington State residents, but they're expanding across the country. They're looking to move all the way across the country out to Massachusetts as well. They have an assessment form that they do. And then they do create that database for roommates. And they also work with families to maximize the resources that they're taking advantage of, make sure they're not missing anything. So I was talking with an attorney about them earlier this week. Is that the way to connect families? So thank you for bringing it up. Yeah. That could be a great opportunity. It really is like .com.
I found my note. Takes me forever, right? Yeah, partnersforhousing.com and affordable housing online. You're right. They weren't in Mass, but they did mention that thing about the 30% rent with the Section 8 voucher, and that definitely piqued my interest, because I was thinking, oh, this would be great. I could have my other son, because under ADA, you can use a Section 8 voucher for a rental of a family member. And I'm like, I could have my other son, buy property and then rent it to Owen and all of his friends, just trying to think of ways to, keep them happy later in life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great option. I will work with Partners for Housing. I haven't reached back out to them yet, but that is potentially a great resource. And some of the things that they were talking about with rental vouchers too, because rental vouchers sound awesome, but the warning is that there's not a lot of them. They're expensive because it's paying the rent. So funding is a challenge. So there aren't a ton of them. You can be on the wait list for a long time. But they had some creative solutions. I didn't really understand what they were talking about, where they apply in Oklahoma and then apply it. Once they get it, then they move it to Massachusetts. But they are creative, and that's what we need, is creativity.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you for sharing that, Stacy.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if folks have questions about any of the things we've covered tonight. I think, some of the question that we're all pondering now is how to find ways to connect with each other. How can families find ways to connect with each other? And I know, Andy, that you have at least told us that you're interested in talking to any families who are interested in learning more about this. Part of what you've been doing is meeting with families all over the place, and kind of being a little bit of a personal database at the moment for
Yes.
families who are
Yeah.
listening. So
yeah, that's thank you. That's my plea, is that if families want to talk housing, or it should be talking housing, that I, in my role at MinuteMan, am free to talk with any family anywhere. I'm sort of outside the system. So I have been collecting, I've got a list of over 60 families that I've met with individually, and I track what town you're in, what town you might be looking in, the age of your loved one, and gender, and what might be, what sort of housing are you looking for, hoping to create smaller groups that we can connect. So certainly I'm happy to talk housing. The people I was talking with earlier in the week, they're going to share their lists as well. So we're talking about, I don't know if there's people could give a thumbs up or comment if they would be interested if we did just a potluck at a church in Wellesley, or if that'd be something Cotting might host. But bring together, and then, okay, is your loved one going to need 24/7? Okay, you be in this part of the room. Is your loved one more independent? You be in this part of the room, and then start to break out groups from there. Because I think it's not that our kids have to be a perfect match, but we want to find, help facilitate that communication with other families. So that's one thing that when I meet with each family, I ask, well, do you want to meet other families? And so like today I connected to Andover families. So please feel free to reach out and I am a resource too. I might not know all the answers. I know I don't know all the answers, but I can maybe connect you with someone who does. Because I am in your shoes. I feel like sometimes trying to solve this, I'm on an island, and it's just reassuring to me to know that there are other families working on it.
yes, I think that's sort of the key, to feel like you're not in this alone. You might not these are talking with other families, talking with you, really helps to kind of explore a lot of these out of the box ideas and have a little more time to think about your own situation. But I really appreciate your offer to talk with families, and also for us to all think together about what's a good way to get families together to talk housing.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, there's a few things in the chat. Allison is asking about independent living, who finds the housing.
So independent living it's up to the individual and the family to find the housing. And typically that would be an individual who has a rental voucher, which landlords are required to take. They can't discriminate. So it would be in combination with you would find the residents, like I'd find the residents for Henry, but I'd be working with a service coordinator to get a referral for the independent living support.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, Andy, if you can put your email contact information into the chat for folks.
I can't. It's on the. I think it's on the next slide.
Oh, great.
Well, let's turn.
There you go.
Yeah, so feel free to reach out.
This has been excellent, Andy. Really
well, thank you. I'm excited to meet with kind families because I think you're especially creative too in working on your own solutions. And if there's anything that I can do to help with that, or sometimes it gets discouraging if I can share. I try and collect success stories too.
Yeah.
Because that recharges the batteries. So if you need a success story, you're feeling discouraged, and you need to be cheered up, you can reach out for that too. But I'm excited to hear what other families at Cotting are working on as well.
That's terrific. So we're just about at the end of our time. I want to offer the opportunity to ask a question in the chat or give you some time to copy Andy's contact information if you need that. We'll also be sending the this presentation out to everybody, and the recording will be available due to the magic of our own Amanda Balaguer. And the link will be sent out and posted in the weekly update. So you'll be able to refer back to this if you have any questions. Lots of thanks, Andy, coming in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Perfect. Yes.
Thank you so much, Andy. This is really great.
Thank you, Cotting, for the opportunity. Thank you, people, for coming and sharing. I look forward to talking with y'all.
Yes. And you all know where to find Lola, Kathy, and myself if you need any more information or help with connecting to anybody else. So thank you again for being with us. As we all know, it takes a village, and we have a great village here. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much.